And we're live. So thank you everyone that has joined already. We'll give it a minute or two just to wait for the last minute's crackers, and then we can get going. Okay, we can get started. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining the session today. So today is all around human risk intelligence, which is a new way for MSPs to talk about security. Now, today isn't a heavy product pitch. This is more of a conversation. I'll introduce our guest speaker shortly. What we wanted to do today is discuss some of the common challenges we're seeing our partners go through, the way in which human risk is evolving, some of the contributing factors behind how end users are being targeted is changing, what things we need to have in place to help our clients to become more secure as a result is changing. And so, like I say, it's more of an open forum type discussion with my guest, where we'll be digging into some of the common challenges that they're facing. And then we'll go through a little bit more of a framework about how we can adapt to, again, the new things that we're seeing in the human risk space and how we can talk about it to our clients. So just for quick introductions, my name's Nihil. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at usecure. So my role is all about making sure that our internal teams, from an account management perspective, have the right understanding of how our partners operate and that we have the right process in place to ultimately help you to grow. My team's responsible for making sure that our partners are well trained in the product, that they're comfortable with the go-to-market messaging, and that we can ultimately support them to help human risk to become a part of their stack and to help the MSP to grow as a result. I have Alan here from SaveNet. So rather than me introducing Alan, I'd like to hand over the reins. So Alan, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you just give a high-level introduction as to who you are and what SaveNet do? You're on mute, Alan. Not quite yet.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. There we go.
Apologies. I need to get an MSP technical issues. Apologies about that. Thanks for having me on, Nihil. My name is Alan Hughes. I'm the Chief Operations Officer with SaveNet Solutions. SaveNet was originally founded as a backup and disaster recovery organization, but we've, in the last 5 or 6 years, we've pivoted towards IT managed services with an emphasis on security first. My responsibilities are, apart from seeing the day-to-day operations of the business, it's also with managing the managed service division, our managed services for full IT managed services for our clients, or maybe our firewall managed services, or infrastructure managed services. What we're seeing day-to-day now is clients are more focused nowadays on the security that they require just in order to do business day to day. Each year I'm having meetings with clients, helping them to complete security questionnaires that their vendors or their clients are imposing onto them because they want to see that they're taking security as seriously as they're having to. A lot of that involves us aligning our clients to 27001 and then helping them to get 27001 and NIS2 compliance.
Perfect. And that's exactly why we have you on the call today, Alan. We want to make sure it's grounded in real life things that MSPs can relate to, that we're not just talking about theory, that we can bring in everyday scenarios, the sort of shifts that we're seeing when it comes to things like AI and compliance, like you mentioned, ISO 27001, and real life scenarios about how the human risk conversation is ultimately helping to support those shifts when it comes to, again, a more compliance-led approach for MSPs. So what I wanted to sort of discuss before we go into a bit more of a sort of high-level conversation is why the human risk conversation is changing. And so what we've seen, particularly over the last year or so, is the human element of security is becoming harder to ignore. I think for a long time, human risk has been a medium priority until an incident occurs. It's a case of, we don't have to invest in it necessarily. We can tread water, and we'll really invest in it when the time comes. And quite often that time doesn't come until an incident occurs or an auditor mandates that something gets put in place. And what we're seeing is, as you alluded to, Alan, is the external pressures on human risk are really ramping up. We know that AI is a huge driver behind that. People are adopting new tools incredibly quickly. Shadow IT is a huge problem. AI is an amazing tool for efficiency, but it also opens us up to exposure. It opens us up to unregulated or unvetted tools being part of our organization and our processes. What we also know is one of the issues with awareness programs in the past is they can be sometimes a little bit isolated in their own environment. It can be activity without proof. Modern human risk requirements, modern compliance frameworks, they talk about actual proof, about making sure that we're going just beyond metrics in a system, that we're also looking at real life behaviors and that we can prove that organizational risk is reducing. And the third prompt behind why the human risk conversation is changing is cyber hygiene gaps. There are a lot more vectors now when it comes to human risk that impact our risk levels. Weak habits, account issues, things like not setting up MFA or repeat passwords or not changing passwords. All of these type of real life behaviors that ultimately fall on our employees and our clients' employees are providing gaps that attackers are exploiting. So the three of those combined really create a very compelling situation for human risk and ultimately make this a conversation that is really relevant and tangible for our clients. A lot of them are experiencing these things, a lot of them are aware of these changes, and that provides us with a really good opportunity to provide a solution and tap into those changes as well. So Alan, from your perspective, of those three sort of high level tiles, are there any that particularly resonate with you and what you're seeing at SaveNet?
AI is definitely going to be a challenge for any organization. It's going to be a challenge then for the MSP as well. You can look at AI from the impacts it's going to have from two perspectives. Like in the last year alone, they're estimating AI has increased cybersecurity incidents sixfold. Like we saw, I think one of the AI models is not releasing a model because of security concerns in that it can scan and it can find vulnerabilities very quickly and release those vulnerabilities. We're finding organizations don't really know if AI is actually in use in the business. So, that itself poses a big problem. If you don't know if your team are using AI, then you don't know what data they're giving AI. We discuss, when we're talking with prospective clients, we'll talk to them, well, what's your AI plan? What's your AI journey look like? We don't have one. Are your staff using AI at the moment? Oh, no, we don't think so. And then we'll invariably come in and find, well, actually, 3 or 4 of your staff are actually interacting with ChatGPT on a very regular basis. They're uploading files to it. They need to make considerations about AI, like what are we doing in our internal infrastructure? We can't just turn AI on because anything that has been incorrectly shared in the organization is going to be visible to AI, and potentially there's data that will be visible to the AI models that your staff then will be able to access. On the activity without proof, usecure is a great feature in there. You can go into the learning modules, you can see the courses reports, and we can see that staff are interacting and training, or we can see staff who are not interacting and doing the actual training, but that doesn't tell the whole picture. I have used that from a perspective to talk to clients about staff who have potentially compromised themselves, but those staff have been up to date on their training, which means they're not paying attention to what they're clicking on. And then the vice versa. We have clients who have clicked on phishing emails, but then they haven't actually been taking part in the actual training. So activity in the training doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually up to date on the cybersecurity the cybersecurity concepts that they should be up to date with.
Absolutely. I think the speed of the AI evolution as well is a really important one, because I think week on week it changes, new tools are released, new updates to those tools are released, and everyone, I think, feels anxious to not be left behind. And so there's almost this bit of almost like a battle where people don't want to clip the wings of their employees and discourage them necessarily from using different AI tooling that can help them to be more efficient. but then that leaves so much more exposure and so much more unregulated use. And like you mentioned, people pumping tons of information into ChatGPT, which is going to learn from that and then potentially use that to inform how it answers other organizations, maybe competitors. And so trying to get that balance right is really, really tricky.
Absolutely. We have one client going through an AI journey at the moment, and thankfully their IT manager is very on the ball when it comes to security, and he's engaged us to do a full project where we're assessing the environment. We've already discovered several shadow AI models that are being used that he wasn't even aware of.
Yeah, and now's the best time to get a hold of it because it can extrapolate. Like the amount of products that people are using is going up year on year because people are testing more things, because more apps are popping up out of nowhere, and that's only going to increase realistically. And so getting a handle on that and getting some sort of safeguards in place to help funnel that usage in efficient ways rather than unsafe ways is really, really important. And so these sort of foundational things are going to form essentially the basis of our webinar today. And like I say, we wanted to make this quite an open conversation between myself and Alan. And so there are a few different, I suppose, risk pillars we want to come back to, but the majority of the session today will be essentially like an open interview, just to hear more about the things that you're going through, Alan, things that you're experiencing, and how you're helping your partners out. And so I think quite often when people look at human risk, it can be quite hard to know where to start. It can be quite hard to know what to prioritize. And so what kind of information are you guys looking at to identify human risk within your customer environments?
So when a client comes to us, be that they're coming on board with us, we're looking for the basics at the very start. I mean, if you're not getting the basics right, it's going to follow on that you're not getting the advanced stuff correct. I mean, we're looking at things like MFA. Is multi-factor authentication turned on, but is it the MFA based on the, say, the Microsoft Authenticator app, or are you still using SMS, multi-factor authentication? I have turned business away because the clients have said to me, we don't want to turn on MFA. It's too much of an inconvenience. And that is a client we don't want to have. It's from a perspective of, if that client isn't going to take security seriously, then that's going to cost us an awful lot more time and resources than we absolutely need to have. Other things as well, like there's a lot of clients who potentially might be using 365 Business Premium, but then they haven't got their conditional access policies set up, not allowing users to actually log in from outside their known locations. Like if they haven't got the basics, or if their MSP that they're currently using hasn't got the basics right, that follows on to other questions around backups. And we'd still be surprised today how many clients or how many businesses will consider OneDrive or Google Drive as proper backup solutions. At the start of this call, I said, a lot of our new clients are looking towards security standards like 27001 and NIS2 and backups. If you say to an auditor that, well, we're using Google Drive or we're using OneDrive as backup, immediately that's going to be a red rag to avoid. They want to see that you're using a proper backup solution that is properly tested. And what's key to them is that you are testing it and you're testing it regularly. More often than not, we're seeing clients haven't given proper consideration to the basics when it comes to IT security. Touching on cybersecurity training, at the start, you'd said investment in cybersecurity training is always kicked down the road. Harping back to my days in IT administration, I remember talking with a consultant he used to come in and manage the solution for System Center Operation Manager for configuring the laptops. And we had the discussion with him around ransomware and the impacts and what could be done to reduce or to eliminate the possibility that ransomware would cause an issue. And he said, there's no solution out there. Your solution is your staff. You have to be investing in education for your staff. You have to teach the staff how to recognize the threats. You have to teach them what to do and what not to do. And it still amazes me today that clients who are going for 27001 or NIS2, when you're looking at the continuous cybersecurity education awareness point in 27001, it clearly says continuous cybersecurity education awareness and training. And they still consider getting everyone into a conference room once a year for a 60-minute lecture where there's a plate of sandwiches on the table, and they hope 3 months later they'll remember all that when they get the phishing email. You're really rolling the dice there as whether or not the staff is going to know what to do when it comes to that.
Absolutely. It's I think a large part of it as well, to what you just mentioned there at the end, is that that level of risk and that level of vulnerability exists whether you find out about it or not. The question is whether you find out about it in a safe environment under your own control, or you find out about it later down the line when it gets exploited. And I think that's sometimes a bit of a misconception around these awareness programs, is that they're not to out people or name and shame or to falsify threat levels. It's a case of let's have a look at the current risk vectors within the organization. Let's assess where they're at, and let's then take action off the back of it. And let's make it an informed decision rather than just sort of seeing what sticks. And you kind of mentioned there about things like sort of resistance, things like MFA, because they can be an inconvenience. And so what would you say are sort of the main or most common security challenges that you're seeing clients struggle with? Is it that buy into the efficiencies of it? Is it a lack of understanding? Like, what would you say are the main reasons why clients struggle with security?
I suppose the clients that are coming to us, either I hesitate to say it, but if they're not being managed by an MSP who has security as the focus, then the security is obviously not going to be up to par. Like the security challenges that'll come back when we take over clients like that and we start to implement the base standards, they'll go, well, why are you putting this app on my phone? Why am I getting Microsoft Authenticator? If you want me to have a Microsoft Authenticator app on my phone, you have to give me a work phone. Sometimes they'll come back and they'll think that this app is actually spying on their phone. A lot of it, I don't know where they come up with these mad conclusions, but once we've actually gone in and we've said, no, all this does is it gives you a 6-digit code, or it'll give you a prompt just to make sure that it is you who's logging into your account. And it's about protecting your account that belongs to the business that keeps you employed on a day-to-day basis. Like, once you get down and you understand what their concerns are, it starts to disappear, but it's just not being challenged, or it's not being good security standards are not being enforced in organizations, possibly out of a lack of knowledge, possibly out of I don't want the hassle. But those are the companies who treat it like that are going to be the companies who are going to find out what the actual hassle is once they have a cyber incident.
And those organizations where they maybe don't have an MSP in place already, and then maybe have those process gaps, what do you think it is that most commonly prompts them to actually speak to you guys then?
Quite recently, actually, a few months ago, the reason I had a company talk to us about the security gaps was they had a cyber incident, and they had a very good relationship with their largest client, who was a semi-state body in Ireland. And the semi-state gave them one of these big, long security questionnaires that we've all had to fill in. And when they got the answers back, they said, yeah, okay, there are some serious gaps here. We're not going to be able to continue to do business unless you get this sorted, and get this sorted quickly. Now, company itself was a very small business. We managed to devise a managed service that would allow us to plug those gaps and meet those requirements. And I filled that questionnaire in for him with the managing director, handed it back, and thankful to say they managed to maintain the business and their security has improved. So unfortunately, the driving factors these days tend to be, they've had a cyber incident. I've been on calls with prospects before where I know how they're talking, and I've stopped the call and I've said, by chance, have you had a cyber incident in the last few months? And they said, yes, we have. We had one such client who said to us, backups didn't work for us. We couldn't actually get the backups to do anything because they never tested them. The other driving force, and probably the biggest driving force, would be business. New business. I need to get this. I have to get this standard, and I have to get that standard. And like, when it's sad, but when new business is the reason driving it, you'd be a little bit worried that they're not taking it as seriously as it needs to be. Sadly, those who have had the cyber incident take it an awful lot more serious, and they're going to take it serious moving forward.
Yeah. Well, whereas with those, I presume those that are looking at it more from a new business perspective, it's a case of let's get something in place, we can take that box and then move on. There's no real cultural change around it.
Yeah, we're having to advise clients who are coming to us and saying, yeah, we're going to need this because we're going up for tenders like this. We're going to go, okay, that's great. It's great that you're taking this seriously and you're looking for 27001 and you're looking to demonstrate NIST compliance. Wonderful. But do not think it's a box ticking exercise. You have to get 27001, but then you have to manage it. because you will be audited. It's on a 27,001 is on a 3-year rotation, so you'll have yearly surveillance audits, and then every 3 years you need to recertify. But it's much easier to go through a surveillance and a recertification audit if you've been taking it seriously. If you haven't been doing the work that needs to be done for these certification standards, that will be a very uncomfortable 2 to 3 days for you if you're trying to recertify and you haven't put the work in throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the fact that those new business requirements are becoming more common, where it's prompting people to get something in place for human risk, shows that it's been taken more seriously externally. And then that combines with what we spoke about in the previous slide, but I think you mentioned towards the start of your answer there, Alan, about compliance, ISO 27001. These things are just becoming more common, and they're essentially an external validator that organizations feel this is something which just has to be implemented and has to be in place. And naturally, that does then lead to sometimes you have customers who maybe don't have that external pressure. And what can help, and we sort of touched on it earlier, is about illustrating the real life risks that exist, but actually shining a light on it rather than waiting for it to be found out externally. And phishing simulations are naturally and historically have been a very effective way to represent what the organization's current risk is. And so do you have any sort of real phishing simulation like examples that you've ran recently and what the outcome was of that?
So we did a few years ago, we presented usecure to an education institution in Dublin. There were about 200 users overall. Now, at the start, when we started selling usecure, we used to run phishing simulations as part of the trial. But thankfully, as IT departments and companies have become a little bit more security conscious, they don't necessarily allow you to authenticate against the tenant straight away, which is good practice. So we don't always get to do them. But in this case, we did. We ran, and this harks back to usecure's fantastic service, we were able to get a phishing simulation built based on their public Moodle platform. And we ran a phishing simulation over a 2-week period against the organization. It was 200 staff. 50% of the business visited the link in the email. 50% of those who visited the link in the email entered in their username and their password. And one of those persons was a member of the IT department. So once we went back to the business and said, you have a massive risk here because your staff don't know what to do, it didn't take them long to actually sign up to the usecure system. So we kicked off the autumn roll, we kicked off the gap analysis, we got the training going, we got going on a regular basis. They kept an eye on participation. We reran the simulation again 12 months later, and I'm glad to say I think we got 20 people who visited the link in the email and less than 5 entered the username and password. So, I mean, a reduction of 45 people in the space of 12 months who compromised their accounts. I mean, that just was a clear demonstration. Investing in your staff and helping them to know the threats is absolutely the first line of defense. We always say to our clients, we can build the security walls for you as high as you like, but if you haven't taught your staff how to recognize the threats, they're literally opening up the front door and letting them into the organization. So your staff are the first line of defense, not the last.
It's a really good way of putting it. And when you had, I presume you might have had like a debriefing meeting with that client and showed them the results, what was their reaction?
I think, if I'm remembering that call now, it was a little bit of stunned shock, I suppose, is probably the best way. The fact that so many people interacted with the message, so many people then actually compromised themselves. And I think it was a little bit embarrassing because it was obviously the IT manager who was on the call. It wasn't himself, thankfully, who entered the username and password. It was a member of his team. But for a member of your IT team not to recognize a phishing attack or a phishing email, it potentially was, it was embarrassing for them. But look, they parked the embarrassment and they realized this is a real risk. This is a real issue. And if we don't deal with this now, thankfully this was a practice or a simulation, we'll only be actually having to deal with it in real life. And it's far less pleasant to actually have to deal with it in real life.
Yeah. And in a weird way, sometimes that can help with long-term engagement because leadership buy-in is often one of the determining factors about whether an awareness program sticks or doesn't.
Yes.
And sometimes having someone in the IT department or someone at a C level who engages with it and is bought into the idea of it can can have a ripple down effect so that it then gets better engagement. I mean, from your experience, how important is that leadership buy-in when it comes to getting engagement with those security awareness programs?
It's the deciding factor of whether or not this is going to succeed or whether this is going to fail. I put it to you this way: if I'm the ordinary Joe on the actual department floor, and I see my manager couldn't give two hoots about cybersecurity training courses that come in, why am I going to give two hoots? Why am I going to care? You know, when we kick off usecure, and for us it's a mandatory for managed service clients. They have to do cybersecurity training, and if they say, well, we don't want the cybersecurity training, that's fine. There's plenty of other MSPs out there, and they'll look after you. But if you're coming to us, it's a security first focus. You have to take cybersecurity training is an absolute mandatory. It's non-negotiable. So when we're kicking it off, the very first thing we're doing is, right, give us your organization structure. So here's the usecure at the top. We have the accounts department, we have the sales department, the marketing department, we have the development department, etc., etc. And then we map that to the 365 security environments. We'll map it to the departmental groups, and we have the users come into the departmental groups, and we stick the managers onto the departmental groups. And then what's key is the weekly summary report has to go out. And what we say to the IT managers, you have to get your managers to buy in. You chase your managers chase your staff, not you chase 200 people. Your IT manager hasn't got the time to chase 200 staff, but he might have the time to chase maybe 10 managers, and the 10 managers in turn will chase them. So it's from the top down. And if the top is chasing the below will just get it done. But if the top aren't taking part in it or aren't bothered, why would your staff be?
Exactly. That cultural element is so important, because we found sometimes staff members don't really know exactly what part they have to play, or that they are an active part in the security ecosystem, because we invest a lot in the infrastructure around them, and they know they have an external IT team that are brought in to help them out. And it almost creates this, understandably, a bit of complacency, especially if they haven't been communicated like policies that they should follow, or they haven't been sent training, or their manager isn't telling them the importance of cybersecurity. And I think what you spoke about earlier with that example of that client where they had that 45 user reduction in a year, I think I imagine they had very strong buy-in internally because of the strength of that simulation at the start.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like once they went back, like obviously, look, any solution will require buy-off depending on budgets. I think the price of usecure, while not expensive, it still exceeded their budget of what they were allowed. They had to go and get approval. Being able to produce the report, well, okay, you can pay X amount now, or you can pay multiples of X if something happens because these 50 people have clicked on something and entered in usernames and passwords. I mean, that level of evidence showing this is a massive risk to the business, it really didn't take long to get sign off for that. So absolutely being able to present the evidence that the risk is there and it's being interacted with on a daily basis, that's really going to help get a business over the line to decide, yes, this is something we absolutely need.
Yeah. And then the long-term ripple effect from that means that you then get the continuous engagement, you see the metrics improve, you improve the organizational risk, and that's how you then end up with that reduction of 45 users, I think you said, after 12 months. So that top-down culture, it's really important, because again, like you mentioned it as well, Alan, like you can't necessarily blame the user if they haven't been told what's expected of them. Why would they take that extra ownership on their own accord? So it's important that we're communicating to them what's expected. And things like ISO 27001, things like NIST2 and DORA, they all speak about informing people of their responsibilities and having those procedures and policies in place. So it all is interconnected.
I mean, what's key with it as well, I mean, I have had clients who have attempted to use usecure as a method possibly of discipline, where if staff are not doing the training or if staff aren't, failing simulations, there's been talk about bonuses being curtailed and things like that. And we've immediately stepped in and said, that's the wrong use of the system. If you use the system like that, you will absolutely get no engagement. Why would I engage with a system that's potentially going to impact my job? You want your staff to be interacting with it. You want them to be making the mistakes in the training system. You don't want them to be making the mistakes out in the wild. So where it's very important, where you see organizations who are attempting to say, well, we could use this, to curtail them, or, make sure, we can keep the bonuses down, or, even to discipline them. Absolutely, you have to step in at that point and say to them, no, that's the wrong thing. All you'll do is drive participation in the opposite direction of what you actually want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it comes back to that point about priming them to be a proactive part rather than being almost like scared of interacting with anything security based. So I think a lot of what we've spoken about so far, and understandably so, has been around course completion rates and phishing engagement and that kind of stuff, which are absolutely fundamental things we need to get a grip over. We need to see that improvement over time. But in your experience, why should MSPs move beyond those completion rates and awareness training metrics?
I mean, I gave the example at the start. We've had users who have clicked on a phishing email and they've been participating very regularly in training. And likewise, we have staff participating in or not participating in the training who have clicked on it. So participation alone doesn't give us the full picture. I mean, we tend to try and look at the particular type of person that's likely to get hit. So, I mean, a finance person is a member of the finance department is a person who's going to get interacted with regularly. And we tend to focus on the accounts. Is MFA set up? Is it operational? Is it enforced? It's, account people, it's very important to enforce MFA in the actual organization itself. Training is one aspect of it. And then you have to assume that, okay, that's done its job, or potentially there's going to be the failure, but the next steps along the line, if that doesn't meet the step, what's the next step? And if that doesn't, what's the next step? And if that doesn't, what's the next step? It's multi-layered is how you're going to essentially do that. And what's great with usecure, it gives us one point, but it gives us a level of information taken from course participation, or then the UBreach services. If I see, for example, the CEO has used his account for Fitbit, which we have seen they're using their work accounts for things like that. We know, well, that service has been compromised, so that user potentially has information out there for sale on the dark web. And then that user doesn't have MFA actually set up in his account. And as a managing director with a LinkedIn profile who also had a hack and had data breach, we potentially have a chain of how a cyber attack is actually going to get in. So everything together gives us a clearer picture of what the bigger risk potentially could be for an organization.
It's a great way of putting it, the chain, because those things in isolation can be quite problematic, but you combine them together and you create this flow, and all of a sudden there's a much more comprehensive risk profile on that user. And it's going beyond measuring activity. It's around human risk intelligence, make sure we can measure risk. I really like the point you made about a finance person. Like, different users have different levels of risk, different levels of access, and it's really important that we can identify that. I think you mentioned as well, Alan, about like talking about next steps. So we've got this data. This is what we should do. Here's the step-by-step playbook, basically, to try and reduce that risk. So are you guys using human risk data during things like QBRs and service reviews?
We've moved beyond. Look, as an MSPs, we've all done QBRs where we're talking about here's your servers and here's your endpoints and here's the patches that we've deployed. I mean, that's kind of the standard stuff that you will always talk about. To be honest, I think most of the clients don't really pay particular attention. They just want to know, is it working? Is it safe? And that's fine. But we try to look beyond. We go into more in depth into the actual training. And I have some clients who are fantastic on the training. I have one client who has a 99% participation rate, 99% completion rate, and a success score of 94%, or average score of 94%. I wish all the clients were like it. But we take them through that and show them the full picture and go, right, here's your finance guy. He's a problem, okay, because he's not doing the training. And now when I go to the account, I can see we had to bully him into setting up MFA. And the chances are the password is probably the same password that he's emailing across. So we're trying to paint them a picture of the overall risk. We take care of the standard security on your endpoints, on your network, on the firewalls, on your 365 tenants, and so on. But you need to be getting the staff to take it a bit more seriously and to understand the risks of them doing something incorrect and what those impacts are going to have on the actual business. So taking that example, showing a user who isn't participating in the training but clicked on a phishing email, and we're kind of going, well, look, he hasn't participated in the training and he's now clicked on a phishing email, an actual phishing email, but the security protocols we put in blocked it. But there's your problem. He hasn't. There's potential problem. because I can't guarantee that had he done the training, he wouldn't have clicked on it, because I have had users who have done the training and have clicked on it. But we know there's a gap right there. We know he's not participating in the training. So it stands to reason there's a very strong potential. Had he done the training, he would not have clicked on the link. So using all of that data together, showing he hasn't participated, he's in finance, we had to bully him into doing MFA, and we're seeing breaches on his account. That is a huge risk for the that user in his account is a huge risk for the actual business.
Yeah. And I think the point about clients not necessarily, when you have those QBRs, there's always exceptions, but not always caring about the minutiae about how you got to certain outcomes. It's more, what have you identified and what impact is that going to have on our organization? It's that usability in balance with protection, that talking about outcomes and not necessarily needing their sort of step-by-step understanding about everything that you're doing. It's more just, are you making us more secure? Is there intelligence behind the actions that you're taking as my MSP to make sure my organization is now more secure and more efficient?
What I'd be saying, Nihil, like for your MSPs, you have access to this information within usecure. Don't be waiting for the QBR. So you want to get across to your clients, I am thinking about you first. I'm thinking about your security. If you spot these black holes, I am on the phone, my team are contacting me going, Joe Bloggs in this organization, he's trying to access such and such, or he's trying to install this, or he clicked on this link, and we're going, right, where was the fall in the chain? What broke this? How did this get through? And we're then straight on to the client. Okay, we found this, we need to do this, this is what you do. It's up to the client if they want to do it. But if you're contacting them with the information you're finding all along the way, it's proving to the client, this MSP is doing something for me. This MSP is working in the background. They're not just responding because John down the road needs to get a finance package installed on his computer. They're actually proactively managing our interests and taking care of the security that we need them to take care of.
And also, it sounds like the language that you're using there and the examples are more about business risk rather than just technical risk.
Yeah, like from a if you're anyway a competent MSP, and I'm sure we all are, you will have the basics of the security taken care of, and then after that, it's the users and what risks are being introduced. More often than not, accidentally, because they're not meant to know absolutely everything. That's what we're here for. So it's once we spot, okay, and it is normally our solutions that we've put in as the second and the third and the fourth stop in the actual safety nets for the business, where we're seeing, okay, something got through. Why did it get through? What was the problem? What was the cause? How did we fix it? And then we're presenting that to the client. I mean, QBRs for us have evolved to very much nearly weekly informal conversations with the direct person responsible for IT in the organization. We're still producing the QBR reports. We're still presenting them to the client. But more and more, we're actually having ongoing informal conversations. They're contacting me. We have this going on. Alan, what can you do for us? What's here? Or I'm contacting them. John, we've seen such and such going on. We need to have words with such and such. They're doing this now on a more regular basis. We need to, get them to stop what they're doing or realize why what they're doing is causing a problem. It's if you're just waiting for your quarterly or your yearly QBRs, you're missing an opportunity to present to your client that I am working in your interests.
So a lot of our partners speak to us about wanting to become more proactive and want to become more advisory led. And I think the fact that you guys are reaching out before the QBR, you're not waiting for the client to request some information or to have that set structure to discuss that information, I think is something which I think a lot of MSPs will resonate with and want to incorporate. I mean, were there any sort of other steps you guys have taken to become more proactive and more advisory led as an MSP?
Proactive and advisory. I suppose by always being involved or having those regular informal conversations with them, we're more in tune with what's happening in the client's environment and more in tune with what their ultimate goals are as an organization or what their objectives might be to achieve. So as new opportunities or new solutions are coming up for us, because I've been having these informal conversations or because I know more about how the organization is operating or where they're headed, I now have a better opportunity to present more focused solutions that are useful to the actual client. I mean, it's not about, for us, it's not about maximizing margin, it's about maximizing efficiency for the client. The client sees they're running efficiently, they're running securely, and we're acting in their interest. That client tends to stay with us for an awful lot longer than if we're maximizing it. Just let's see if we can get this solution in and can we get that solution in. We will pick the solutions we recommend to our clients based on the suitability for the client, not based on the margin it makes for us.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about like emphasize to your clients how you're helping them to be more efficient, how do you guys utilize reporting to like demonstrate the value you're providing, demonstrate those efficiencies, and grow your services as well?
No, you've caught me with that one, Nihil, if I have to be honest. I mean, the training that we go through, I mean, we would talk to them on a weekly basis, or some of our clients, the larger clients, we would talk to them on a weekly basis about the actual training, the participation. And we're pointing out, one client I have, they're a recruitment agency, and we talk to them, I would talk to them every 2 weeks, and I'm showing them, okay, here's your training this week, here's your participation, here's your problem staff, these staff aren't participating in it. And they appreciate that. It means they don't have to pay attention to that. They know, okay, Alan's going to tell me who the problem is, and I'm going to go and fix it then from there. So I'm giving them the problems, and I'm telling them what the solution is, and then they either will rely on me to initiate the solution, or they will go and take care of that solution themselves.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I didn't catch you too off guard there. That was a good answer. Perfect. Yeah, I think it's building a story. It's demonstrating that improvement over time. Really helps to, again, it comes back to that point about outcomes, right? What are we doing for our clients that's going to help them to be more efficient and more secure, and less about inputs. Perfect. Okay, and some really interesting stuff there. So that does link us quite nicely into, you know, the whole purpose of the presentation today is around a new way for MSPs to talk about security and leveraging human risk intelligence as a way of essentially incorporating a lot of things that Alan and I we've just discussed. And so that brings us into human risk intelligence. And human risk intelligence really helps to change the MSP conversation. You know, we've spoken a lot during the last sort of half an hour about how historically with security awareness programs in particular, it can be a case of, you know, here's the training results, we've ticked that box for you, let's move on to the next thing. And actually being able to prove the value you've provided, being able to demonstrate insight into real life risk signals is really tricky. What we're looking to do with human risk intelligence is to give you a new talk track where it's around remediation. It's around, here's what we understand around your organization and the wider risk picture. You know, bring in things like what Alan mentioned around the job roles of people, you know, what vulnerabilities that brings them. Being able to surface that risk, being able to understand what needs to be prioritized. You know, we don't just want a massive information. It's, okay, great that we have all that data. What do we actually do about it now? And then being able to demonstrate to your customers and build that story with those reports to show that we are making progress, we are being proactive, and that we are ultimately reducing risk, but not just in a way that is isolated in a security awareness program, but something that brings in real life risk signals as well. And that's what links us into human risk intelligence. And so there are 4 pillars for a 4-stage model for human risk intelligence that will allow us to identify those real life risk signals, that will allow us to identify in reality how our employees are interacting, whether they are actually employing the training that they've been trained on, whether they're actually enacting the policy processes that they've agreed to. And that 4-step process is designed to essentially mimic what attackers are doing in reality. And as we've discussed, it's not about inflating risk. It's about identifying risk in a safe environment, then we can remediate. So step 1 is target. You know, understanding how attractive this user is to an attacker. And again, that brings back to Alan's point about, you know, somebody in finance, the information they have access to, the seniority, the department of them. All that information is really insightful for an attacker. The next thing is, how well can this user actually recognize risk? You know, we've spoken a lot about training engagement. We've spoken a lot about phishing simulations. Those are fundamental parts of modern human risk. But the idea is we need to supplement them with other pillars as well. And so hygiene is a really important one. Alan, you mentioned about people being a bit resistant to MFA, maybe it not being enforced, people seeing it as like an inefficiency, breach credentials as well. All of these type of real life behaviors and real life exposures that contribute towards a user's hygiene. And that ultimately tells us how likely they are to be compromised. And then the final thing is access. And if somebody actually has some sort of data incident, what's the blast radius? What could the user reach if they were compromised? The idea is we want to look at these signals as a sequential thing. Similar again, Alan, to what you mentioned about looking at things as a chain. It's exactly the thing that we're talking about with human risk intelligence, is these isolated things can be problematic in their own way, but if we understand how they are interconnected, we can then build a much more representative risk about that person as an individual. And then we have all the insight that we need to be able to remediate. And again, there's a lot of anecdotes that Alan gave about things like MFA not being enforced, things like finance people being targeted. That's exactly what we are trying to represent better within usecure with human risk intelligence. And so what we want to do is essentially bring that to life for MSPs. We want to use a product. So we have a new module called uHealth, which allows us to essentially facilitate human risk intelligence. It's all well and good to say we need to get this insight, we need to understand the access, the hygiene, and the blast radius. But how do we actually get that information? And then how do we actually know how to act upon it? And so as part of our human risk intelligence movement, we have built a product called uHealth, which will integrate with Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, and it will pull a ton of real life signals into the usecure platform. So we can identify where the human and identity risk is building. We can then prioritize who needs attention most, what behaviors are most potentially maladaptive and risky, what steps we need to take. So it's not just an overwhelming list of tasks, it's what needs to be remediated as a priority. That can then guide remediation, those compliance and security conversations, because we then have more context for our clients. And then importantly, we can then prove it. We can show our clients through QBRs, through reviews, or through that proactive element that Alan was talking about. We can show our clients exactly how we are remediating that risk. And so the idea with what we're moving into is supplementing what we currently do around human risk management, but using real life signals, real life behaviors to move into human risk intelligence. And as a result, that really helps you as MSPs to drive a more context-driven, relevant awareness program that brings in those threat vectors and ultimately gives you clear steps to remediate and prove that value moving forward. And so, Alan, from your perspective, I know you've spoken about things like understanding the organization, understand them on an individual level, and then having those steps to then remediate. Is this the type of thing which you think could ultimately support the type of process and give you that kind of insight that you've been sort of touching on and looking for?
No, absolutely. I mean, training participation is one thing, data breach is another, but then seeing the users who aren't participating, those users are also in new breach, and then we move in being able to identify incorrect setups in their accounts. They don't have MFA set up, password hygiene is not great on the actual account. You've built a chain of a potential attack there. This person doesn't know what they're looking for. This person already has data for sale about them on the dark web. We look at their account, the password is very poor according to the hygiene strength of it. It's probably going to be a reiteration of the password they've had since they first started using the internet. And then the fact that MFA or something like that is not properly configured. There's a full chain of potential risks to that particular client. I mean, if you understand that client, that user's role in the actual business, that will then give you the impact if that account was potentially hacked. And that's extremely useful to be able to sit down and sit to your clients and say, look, this is why you turn MFA on. Take a look at your finance team. They have 3 or 4 of them appearing in data breaches. They're hardly participating in the cybersecurity training, no matter how many emails we actually send them. They don't have MFA set up, and the password strength is showing extremely low. So if any one of those got compromised, that's a potential real issue for the business if that happened.
Yeah, perfect. And that brings us really nicely on to the next element as well, which is within UHealth, we're very conscious of making sure that these different risk signals aren't isolated. And again, it comes down to being able to identify the highest priority remediation steps. And so what we want to do is create toxic combinations. We want to understand where if somebody has poor account hygiene and they also have a high target value because they work in finance and report directly to the CEO. And they also have low awareness because they're not doing their training and they're not engaging, or they are engaging with phishing attacks. Those type of toxic combinations help us to understand exactly who needs that urgent remediation. And so it's a three-step process. We want to surface that risk. We want to look at those 4 pillars and understand which users have those combinations that are not desirable. We then want to connect those signals into priorities, very clear levels of prioritization that your clients can understand. But then ultimately, and this comes back to the point you were making, Alan, around showing outcomes, not just talking about what we're going to do. Being able to then show risk improvement, being able to report and say, these are the things that we've done off the back of it. We haven't asked for your permission. We're your MSP. It's our job to keep you secure. We've identified that a user that has a high level of target value, poor user hygiene, and has high levels of access and privilege and isn't doing their training. We have identified that as a high risk, a toxic combination. So in order to remediate that, we have forced a password reset. We have sent them reminders on their training and poked them to actually do it. And now all of a sudden that toxic combination is much more under control. And that outcome-driven conversation is a much easier way for you to prove your service value, to fundamentally make your clients more secure, but also to justify potentially stretching your margins because you are taking that proactive approach. Essentially, UHealth can be your facilitator and your crutch to incorporate human risk intelligence and to become a more proactive MSP. Now, we're also very conscious when it comes to launching a new product, when it comes to launching new messaging. It is really important that we can support our partners and not expect them to build out the messaging on their own and build out their own workflows. And so we've spent a lot of time within usecure building support and resources, not just on human risk intelligence and UHealth, but on the general product as well. So resource hubs with guides on how to use the product, sales playbooks, turnkey campaigns, so you can go and market to your customers with white labeled campaigns, prospecting tool, account management support, and growth perks as well. But we are very dedicated to enabling our partners to make sure we can make this as easy as possible for you. We appreciate that MSPs are often short on time and have a lot of vendors that are asking for their resource and their attention. And so the more we can do to make this easy for you and for you to leverage the human risk intelligence messaging, the better for both parties. And so, Alan, you guys obviously at SaveNet have been a partner with us for a while, a long time now. Yep. Are there any particular sort of resources or ways of support that you found have particularly helped you guys out?
A particularly useful one has to be the phishing campaigns that we can get built based on clients' platforms. So that educational institution I discussed earlier on, they have a Moodle public platform. We asked usecure to create that for phishing simulation. Now, bear in mind, they're not even a client yet. They're a possible client that might buy, might not buy. But the resource had the service had the campaign turned around in 24 hours for us, and we were able to kick it off the next day. Likewise, something basic, but after the fact, when the client, when a potential client becomes a client, from time to time I get queries about the actual tool, or something is not working, we need a bit of support, and I have to say the service guys are absolutely fantastic. And normally within 5 minutes, if there's no one available immediately, they're there quick. So don't put off dealing with it. They're there to help you. The services are great. I have to say, the guys, I think I've dealt primarily with Charlie quite a bit, and he's really good at getting back and getting issues solved for us. You have the support there. What I will say as well, we had another client, a semi-state body in Ireland. It was probably one of the best adoptions of usecure I saw of all my clients. He really got in and started using the actual marketing material, or the postering material. And he decided he was going to make put usecure front and center in front of everyone's. We contacted usecure. We bought the promotional mouse mats. We bought about 200 promotional mouse mats off you. He put them onto everyone's desk. He put up the posters everywhere. He badgered the management. He badgered the executive team. and they have massive participation, all from the resources that come within the actual tool.
It's a great example. The mouse mats, people absolutely love them. It's
I was thrown for 6 when I got this email in my inbox saying, Alan, bit of an odd one. By any chance, could we buy 200 of the usecure mouse mats off you? And I go, I'll have to have a think about that one and see who can I talk to. But thankfully, we came through, and they were absolutely over the moon. And his point being, it's there, it's front and center, it's in their face every single day. They can't say that they don't know about it. I'll give you one last funny one. I think you might have seen it on LinkedIn. In that recruitment agency, they have a Halloween competition, and the person who won the Halloween competition last year dressed up as Cyberto from the cybersecurity training modules. He came in, one of the guys who was on site of the day contacted me and said, you never guess, one of the guys is dressed up as Cyberto. We published it up there on LinkedIn, but that shows they were engaging, they understood the content. Cyberto became a fun character from them in the actual business.
Exactly. No, that's great, because so often training can be a chore, and little things like that, because the awareness program, by the nature of it, so much of it is visible to the end users, and so much of security just isn't. And so the critical part about getting that buy-in is people feeling a connection to it, and feeling like it's relevant to them, it's built with them in mind. And so that's that's really great to hear. Perfect. Okay. And then in terms of next steps, so in fact, actually, before I go through next steps, I mean, Alan, it's been really great to have you on. Some really, really interesting insight there from you. Sorry. We've obviously covered a lot. Is there any sort of overall takeaway, if you were to sort of speak to the audience today, if there's one thing to sort of take away from the session today, what would be the main point you'd want them to focus on?
usecure gives you quite a lot of information already to talk to your clients about. What I've seen the UHealth service, I think it's quite a logical next step for it. This enables you to set yourself apart from the break-fix MSPs. You know, anyone can fix a computer, anyone can fix a software package, but leading conversations with your clients about what they should be considering or the potential risks to them sets you apart from, say, the 2 or 3 person organization who they ring up when they have an issue. You want to be proactive for your clients. You don't want to be reactive. That's what's going to set you apart. And usecure, the information you're getting from usecure already is pretty good to help you do that. This additional service, which I have seen and trialed and I do like, I think that's really going to help you elevate to the next step.
It's a really good point. I think so often MSPs, because it's such a competitive space, a lot of MSPs are considering, how can I stand out? What can I do a little bit differently? But also, what can I do that's going to, comes back to that point about efficiencies, help my clients out without becoming an exponential burden on me as a result. And so we're really excited about UHealth. We're really excited about human risk intelligence. We feel like it really can be that, that facilitator, that catalyst to help partners, like you say, Alan, to really differentiate and really move into that next phase. Things are evolving so much in the space. How can we help our partners to become differentiated, and to help human risk to become really at the forefront about how they help secure their customers? And we're really confident that human risk intelligence and UHealth can essentially be the crutch to do that. And so if you are interested in learning more about UHealth, please scan that QR code. One of our account managers can talk you through the messaging, how it works in practice, support you with go-to-market actions. And fundamentally, the goal is to help you have more meaningful client conversations, create that new stream of revenue, and then give you more tooling to prove the human risk service value that you're providing to your clients. So Alan, thank you again for taking part. It was really good to chat to you today.
No problem.
Yeah, perfect. And everyone else, again, you have the QR code here if you would like next steps, and thank you for your time.